Human helped an alien girl cross the drifting planks. Her last look spoke more than words. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main characters. Ethan Wells, an average man from a small town in the Midwest, had never imagined his life would intersect with someone, or something, so far from his world. He had lived his days quietly, working at a local mechanic shop, the hum of engines and the smell of oil the backdrop to his routine existence. Yet, nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter. One afternoon, while walking home through a forest clearing near the outskirts of town, he spotted something that stopped him in his tracks. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, but as he drew closer, his heart skipped a beat. There, standing among the trees, was a girl. No, not just any girl. She was unlike anyone Ethan had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow, an iridescent hue that flickered between shades of blue and green. Her eyes, bright and unearthly, seemed to pierce through him as if she could see into his very soul. Ethan froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. She was just standing there, gazing at him with a mix of curiosity and something else. Uncertainty, perhaps, or fear. Then, in a voice as soft as the breeze, she spoke. "Help," she whispered. Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. His brain was racing, trying to process what he was seeing. Was this real? Was she real? But before he could speak, she took a step toward him, and that's when he noticed the danger she was in. The ground beneath her feet was unstable, a large gap separating her from solid ground. A bridge of old, drifting planks stretched across the chasm, barely holding together, the wood creaking under the slightest pressure. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just some strange encounter. This was a life-or-death moment. Without thinking, he rushed toward her, his instincts kicking in. "Don't worry," he said, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. "I'll get you across." But as he reached out to help, he could see the fear in her eyes. This wasn't just about crossing a rickety bridge. No, there was something more. Something unspoken. He could feel it in the air. Something told him that this moment, this brief encounter, was more than just an accident. Ethan couldn't explain it, but he knew that in helping her, something was about to change, for both of them. He took her hand, and together, they stepped onto the first plank. Ethan's heart raced as he helped Lyra onto the first plank. The wood creaked under her weight, and a gust of wind made the already unstable bridge sway slightly. He held onto her hand firmly, trying to reassure both her and himself. The distance across the gap seemed endless, the chasm below a dark void that felt as if it could swallow them whole at any moment. The bridge wasn't just fragile, it was alive with the sounds of danger, groaning with every step they took. Lyra's eyes never left Ethan, her gaze intense and full of silent gratitude. Ethan couldn't help but wonder how she had ended up here. She wasn't from around here. Of that, he was certain. The way she looked at everything, the way she moved, it was as if she didn't fully understand the world she was now a part of. Yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was getting her across safely. As they moved slowly, one step at a time, Ethan noticed that the planks beneath them weren't all the same size. Some were too small, others cracked with age, and a few barely held together at all. It took all of his focus to keep his balance and not let the fear of falling overwhelm him. The sound of Lyra's breathing was soft, almost imperceptible, as if she were afraid to make a sound. Ethan, however, was breathing heavier with each step, his mind racing through the endless possibilities of what could go wrong. The wind picked up, and a few planks shifted, sending a shudder through the entire structure. Ethan's grip tightened on Lyra's hand. He could feel her slight tremor, and he looked down at her. She wasn't speaking, but her eyes seemed to be saying everything. It was a mixture of fear and trust. She trusted him to get her across, and yet she knew she couldn't do it alone. Ethan's mind flashed to a dozen different scenarios. The bridge collapsing, the two of them plummeting into the unknown below, the hopelessness of it all. But he couldn't let that happen. He couldn't fail her. Stay close, he whispered, though the wind threatened to drown out his words. Lyra nodded slightly, her face pale but determined. As they moved further along the bridge, Ethan could feel the strain of the situation weighing on them both. They were halfway across now, the ground beneath them growing more unstable with each passing second. The wind howled louder. The sound of the creaking would almost deafening. Then, without warning, one of the planks beneath them snapped, falling into the abyss below. Lyra's eyes widened in panic, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He pulled her closer, forcing his body to shield her as they stumbled forward. The remaining planks seemed to shake in response, as if the bridge were about to give way completely. "We're almost there," Ethan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But the truth was, he had no idea how much longer the bridge would hold. They were taking a risk with every step. Lyra's grip on his hand tightened, and he felt her breath quicken, her heart racing. Ethan could see it in her eyes now, the same fear that had been in his own heart not moments ago. But there was something else there too, something deeper. She was afraid, yes, but there was also a quiet sense of acceptance. Acceptance that, no matter what happened, she had put her trust in him. And in that moment, Ethan realized that this wasn't just about crossing a bridge. This was about a bond being formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. They were strangers from different worlds, and yet here they were, fighting together for survival. The last few planks ahead seemed to stretch on forever, but finally, with one last, shaky step, they reached solid ground. The relief was instant. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with gratitude. But there was more there too, something unspoken, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked, sharing a silent understanding that words could never fully express. Ethan looked down at the ground beneath them, still shaking from the intensity of the crossing. They had made it across the bridge, but something in the air felt different now. It wasn't just the fear or the relief. It was something deeper, something unspoken between them. Lyra, who had once seemed so alien, was now standing beside him, her presence somehow more familiar than before. Her wide, glowing eyes met his once again, but this time, there was something else in them, curiosity. A quiet wonder that seemed to reflect the very same sense of uncertainty he had felt earlier. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked, his voice softer than usual. She nodded, but her gaze lingered on the surroundings, taking in the unfamiliar landscape as if she were trying to make sense of it all. The forest around them was dense, the trees towering high, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to encounter someone like Lyra. She was clearly out of place, standing there with her otherworldly features, yet there was something captivating about her, something that made Ethan want to protect her even more. I don't know where I am," Lyra said, her voice hesitant. She spoke in perfect English, but her tone had an otherworldly quality, as if she were still trying to grasp the language fully. "You're safe now," Ethan replied, though he wasn't entirely sure what safe meant in this situation. They were both in unknown territory. He had no idea where she had come from or what had brought her here, but one thing was clear, she needed help, and for some reason, he was the one who had found her. Lyra looked at him again, her eyes studying him in a way that made Ethan feel as if she were trying to understand him. I don't know how to get back," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. Ethan took a step closer, his hand instinctively reaching out to comfort her. "We'll figure it out," he said, though he had no idea where to start. The silence between them grew thick, the weight of the moment settling in. It wasn't just about the bridge anymore. It wasn't even about the unknown dangers that might still be lurking around them. It was about the strange connection that had already formed between them, a human and an alien, two beings from completely different worlds, now bound by something neither of them could explain. Lyra looked away, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something familiar. Ethan followed her gaze, but saw nothing that seemed to stand out. The forest stretched on endlessly, with no sign of civilization in sight. He knew they couldn't stay here forever. "We need to find shelter," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "There's no telling what's out here, and night is coming soon." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze returning to him. Ethan wasn't sure if she understood the urgency in his voice, but she seemed to trust him. Lead the way, she said softly. Ethan nodded, taking the first step into the dense woods, with Lyra following close behind. As they walked, he couldn't help but think about how much his life had changed in the past few hours. The world he knew had just expanded in a way he couldn't have imagined. And as strange as it was, he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was just beginning. Ethan and Lyra moved deeper into the forest, the shadows of the trees growing longer as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Ethan kept a steady pace, but he couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease in the pit of his stomach. They were still a long way from any sign of civilization, and the forest seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Lyra walked just behind him, her steps light but measured, as if she were listening to the forest around them. Ethan noticed how she seemed to pick up on every sound, every movement, as though her senses were sharper than his. He glanced back at her, curious. "How do you know where to go?" he asked. Lyra's gaze flickered to him for a moment, and then she looked ahead again. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I can feel it. Something inside me. It tells me where to go." Ethan wasn't sure if he believed her, but the way she said it made him wonder. Maybe she was more connected to this place than he had realized. Or maybe it was something beyond his understanding. As they walked, the forest began to feel less like a barrier and more like a guide. The trees parted just enough to reveal a small clearing up ahead. The light from the setting sun filtered through the branches, casting a soft glow on the ground. Ethan felt a small surge of hope. Maybe they'd found shelter. Maybe this was the moment things would turn around. But as they stepped into the clearing, something caught his eye. A large rock formation, almost like a natural doorway. It looked like it had been shaped by something, or someone, long ago. Ethan felt an odd sense of familiarity, as if he had seen this place before, even though he knew he hadn't. Lyra stopped next to him, her expression unreadable as she looked at the rock. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan hesitated, his gaze fixed on the stone structure. "What do you mean?" he asked. "It's like a presence," she said slowly, her hand rising toward the rocks, as if she were reaching for something just beyond her grasp. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know what she meant, but something about the place felt different, ancient, even. It wasn't just the way the light hit the rocks or the way the wind seemed to shift when they entered the clearing. There was something here, something powerful. Lyra stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the surface of the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft rumble, the ground beneath them trembled. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He instinctively reached out for Lyra, but she didn't flinch. She only stood there, her eyes closed, her connection to whatever force was at work seemingly stronger than ever. The earth beneath them shifted again, and the rocks parted slightly, just enough to reveal a narrow opening leading into the darkness. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. Is this safe?" he asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. Lyra opened her eyes, her expression calm but determined. "It's the only way forward," she said. Ethan took a deep breath, looking into the darkened passage. Whatever lay beyond, he knew they had to keep moving. With one final glance at Lyra, he stepped forward, the narrow opening barely wide enough to fit. Lyra followed closely behind, her presence like a shadow in the dimming light. They had crossed the bridge together, and now they would face whatever lay ahead together, no matter what it was. Ethan and Lyra stepped into the narrow opening, the darkness inside the rock formation swallowing them whole. The air was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the heat of the day they had just endured. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, Ethan could make out the rough, uneven walls of the passage stretching ahead. It was tight, barely wide enough for them to move through side by side, and the air smelled earthy, almost like ancient stone. He glanced at Lyra, her face calm and focused, her glowing eyes casting a faint light that helped guide the way. He wasn't sure what to make of this place. Whatever it was, it felt different, almost alive, like the earth itself was aware of their presence. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, and Ethan had to watch his step carefully to avoid tripping over the jagged rocks. Lyra seemed to move with ease, her steps light and fluid, as if she were more attuned to this environment than he was. Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place, like an outsider in a world he didn't fully understand. The passage twisted and turned, its path unpredictable, and with every step, Ethan could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in around him. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to hum with a strange energy, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. Lyra stopped ahead of him, turning to face him with a look of quiet intensity. "We're close," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the stillness of the cave. Ethan frowned, unsure of what she meant. "Close to what?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow space. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in them, something ancient, something that seemed to transcend time itself. "The source," she said, almost in a whisper. Ethan's brow furrowed. "The source of what?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward, as if drawn by an unseen force, and Ethan followed without thinking. They moved deeper into the passage, and the walls around them began to narrow even more, the space feeling more like a tunnel now. The air was thick with an electric charge, and Ethan could feel his skin tingling as they walked. It was almost as if the very atmosphere were alive, responding to their presence. Then, ahead of them, the passage opened up into a larger chamber, its high ceiling lost in shadow. The ground was uneven, covered in patches of moss and small rocks, but the most striking feature was the center of the room. A massive, glowing crystal stood there, its light pulsing softly, casting an ethereal glow on the walls around it. The air in the chamber felt charged, as if the crystal itself were emitting some sort of energy. Ethan stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. He had never seen anything like it. Lyra, however, seemed almost drawn to it, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and recognition. "This is it," she said softly, her voice filled with reverence. Ethan didn't understand. "What is this place?" he asked, stepping closer to the crystal. Lyra turned to him, her gaze intense. "It's where I came from," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. Lyra stepped forward, her fingers reaching out towards the crystal. "This is the source of everything," she said. "The energy that brought me here, that connects all things." Ethan didn't know what to say. He stood there, staring at the crystal, feeling its power vibrating in the air around him. He had no idea what it meant, but in that moment, he knew that their journey had only just begun. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the crystal, his mind racing with questions. The air around them hummed with an almost palpable energy, as if the very room was alive. Lyra, too, was transfixed by the glowing stone. Her hand hovered just above it, as if she were waiting for some kind of signal. "This is where I came from," she repeated, her voice carrying an undertone of awe, as if the words themselves were too heavy to bear. Ethan took a cautious step forward, still unsure what this all meant. "But how? What do you mean this is where you came from?" he asked, his voice full of confusion. Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with something deeper, an understanding, perhaps, of something beyond his comprehension. "The energy of this place, it's what brought me here," she explained softly. "I'm not from this world. I was summoned." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Summoned? By what? Lyra took a slow breath, her gaze returning to the crystal as if she were trying to piece together her own memories. "By the energy that flows through everything. This crystal is the source. It's been here for longer than I can remember, and it connects everything, every being, every place, every moment. It's what gives us life, what keeps the balance." Ethan listened, trying to absorb her words. He didn't fully understand, but he felt the weight of her story, the truth in her voice. He could see the way she was drawn to it, the way the crystal seemed to respond to her presence, pulsing gently as if it recognized her. "And it brought you here? To Earth?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lyra nodded, her fingers still hovering over the crystal's surface. "Yes, but I didn't come here by choice. Something or someone called me. I don't know who or what, but I was pulled here, to this world, to this place." Ethan's mind spun with more questions than he could process. The gravity of what she was saying sank in slowly. "So, you're not here by accident?" he asked. Lyra shook her head, her gaze now turning toward him with an intensity that made Ethan feel as if she were seeing right through him. "No, this wasn't an accident. I was meant to be here, just as you were meant to find me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but found himself at a loss for words. What could he say to that? He had no answers, no way to make sense of everything that was unfolding around him. The only thing he knew for sure was that Lyra wasn't just some lost traveler. She was part of something much bigger than he could fathom. She was tied to this crystal, to this energy that seemed to pulse through the very earth beneath their feet. Ethan stepped closer, his curiosity and fear battling inside him. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Lyra turned to face him fully, her expression soft but resolute. "We need to find out who or what called me here. We need to understand why. Only then will I be able to go back home." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. They were no longer just trying to survive the forest. They were on the edge of something much bigger, something that could change everything. And in that moment, Ethan knew he couldn't turn back. Whatever the future held, whatever Lyra's true purpose was, he was in this with her now. Together, they would face whatever came next. Ethan and Lyra sat in the quiet chamber, the soft glow of the crystal casting faint light around them. The air hummed with an energy that seemed to vibrate in Ethan's bones. Lyra's eyes were fixed on the stone, her expression focused, almost distant, as if she were lost in thought. Ethan had never felt so out of place, so far from everything he knew. But there was something about Lyra, her calmness, her purpose, that made him feel as if he, too, was part of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. "We need to go," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet but determined. Ethan looked at her, confused. "Go? Where?" he asked. Lyra stood up, her movements graceful, almost fluid, as she approached the crystal once more. "I don't know yet," she replied, her voice low. "But something is calling me. The energy here, it's changing. It's as if the crystal knows we've come this far." Ethan stood up too, following her. He could feel the change in the air as well, though he couldn't quite explain it. The hum had grown stronger, almost as if the crystal was alive, reacting to their presence. "What happens if we stay?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with concern. Lyra's gaze flickered to him, her eyes darkening slightly. "I don't know, but I don't think it's safe. Not anymore." The words sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He had no idea what Lyra meant, but he could sense the urgency in her tone. Something was happening, something that neither of them could control. Without another word, Lyra moved toward the narrow passage they had come through, her steps quick and deliberate. Ethan followed, his heart racing, though he couldn't fully understand why. They made their way back through the winding tunnel, the air around them feeling heavier with each step. The hum from the crystal seemed to echo through the walls, and Ethan could feel the ground beneath them vibrate faintly, as if the entire structure was shifting. As they emerged from the passage into the clearing, the forest outside felt eerily still. The breeze had stopped, and the birds that had once filled the air with their calls were silent. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It felt as though the world itself had paused, waiting for something to happen. Lyra stopped at the edge of the clearing, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Something is coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't see anything, but he trusted her. There was no doubt in his mind that she knew something he didn't. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes steady and full of resolve. "We wait," she said, her voice calm. "And when it comes, we face it together." Ethan nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, he wasn't facing it alone. They stood together in the stillness, waiting for whatever the future held. And as the seconds ticked by, the quiet stretched on, thick with anticipation. Ethan and Lyra stood in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The air had grown still, unnaturally so, and the world around them seemed to hold its breath. Ethan's mind raced as he watched Lyra's steady gaze, scanning the horizon for something neither of them could yet see. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves in the trees behind them. It felt as if time itself had frozen, as if the universe were waiting for something to unfold. Ethan shifted his weight, glancing at Lyra. "What do you think it is?" he asked quietly. She didn't respond immediately, her eyes narrowed with focus. It was clear that she was sensing something, something beyond the reach of Ethan's perception. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm, yet filled with an underlying tension. I don't know, she said softly, but it's coming. And when it does, we'll need to be ready. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The way she said it made him feel as if the world itself were about to change. Whatever was coming, it was going to be big. He wasn't sure if he was ready. How do we get ready for something we don't even know about? He asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Lyra turned to him then, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. We stay calm, she said. We face it together. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We always do. Her words were simple, but they carried a strength that gave Ethan a sense of reassurance, though only just. For a moment, he felt the weight of everything they had already been through, crossing the dangerous bridge, discovering the crystal, and now, standing at the edge of whatever this was. It was almost too much to grasp, yet here they were, on the brink of something even greater. The sound of movement broke through the stillness, faint at first, like the whisper of a breeze brushing through the trees. But then, it grew louder, the sound of something, or someone, approaching. Ethan's heart began to race, his pulse quickening. He turned toward the source of the sound, but saw nothing at first. Then, from the shadows of the trees, a figure stepped into the clearing. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, and its silhouette seemed to shimmer and shift as it moved. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The figure was unlike anything he had ever seen before, its form fluid, almost ethereal, as if it were made of shadows themselves. Lyra's stance shifted, and she stepped slightly in front of Ethan, her expression serious and calm. She was ready. Ethan wasn't sure if he was. The figure stopped a few paces away from them, its presence imposing yet strangely familiar. It was silent, observing them with an intensity that mirrored Lyra's. For a moment, neither side spoke, the tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Finally, the figure spoke, its voice deep and otherworldly. You've come far, Lyra, it said, its tone calm but powerful. Lyra stood her ground, her eyes locked on the figure. I've come to find out why I was called here, she replied, her voice unwavering. The figure nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her resolve. You are not the first to seek answers, it said, but you may be the last. Ethan felt his stomach drop. The words were cryptic, but they carried a weight that he couldn't ignore. He glanced at Lyra, wondering if she understood more than he did. She didn't flinch, her expression hardening as she met the figure's gaze. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady, but with an edge to it. The figure was silent for a moment, as if contemplating her question. Then, it spoke again. The balance has been disturbed, it said, its voice almost a whisper. And you must restore it, before it is too late. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, the energy in the clearing thickening. Ethan didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just a chance encounter anymore. This was something bigger, something that would change everything. And there was no turning back now. Ethan stood still, his heart racing as the figure's words echoed in the air. The balance has been disturbed. The phrase hung in the silence, its meaning as elusive as the figure standing before them. Lyra didn't flinch, but Ethan could see the shift in her eyes, a flicker of understanding, of recognition. What balance? She asked, her voice steady but sharp with curiosity. The figure's gaze didn't move from Lyra, its presence heavy and commanding. The balance of the energy that flows through all things. The same energy that brought you here, it explained, its voice resonating like a deep hum in the air. Ethan felt the weight of those words, the realization dawning that what Lyra had said was true. This was much bigger than he had ever imagined. Lyra stepped forward, her posture resolute, her eyes narrowing slightly. And how do I restore it? She asked. The figure tilted its head slightly, as though considering her question. The restoration will not be easy. You must seek the source of the disturbance. But be warned, the path is not without danger. Many have tried and failed. The words were like a challenge, and yet there was no malice in the figure's tone. It was as if it were merely stating a fact, something that could not be avoided. Ethan looked at Lyra, wondering what was going through her mind. She had come here seeking answers, but this was a whole new level of responsibility, one that she hadn't anticipated. She met his gaze for a brief moment, and in that instant, Ethan saw a determination in her eyes that he had never seen before. She wasn't backing down. I'll do whatever it takes, she said firmly, her voice unwavering. Ethan felt a surge of admiration for her, but at the same time, a deep unease gnawed at him. They were in uncharted territory now, facing something far greater than either of them had expected. The figure remained silent, as though waiting for something. Ethan felt the tension in the air grow, the anticipation thick around them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the figure spoke again. Then you must go to the heart of the disturbance. The path will not be clear, and you will face challenges unlike any you have encountered before. Lyra nodded, her expression focused. Where do I find this heart? She asked. The figure paused, its form shimmering slightly, as if it were fading in and out of the shadows. It lies deep beneath the earth, where the energy flows strongest. Follow the signs, and you will find it. The figure took a step back, its presence seeming to dissolve into the surroundings. But remember, it said, its voice growing softer, you are not alone in this. The balance of the world depends on you. With that, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving only the faint echo of its words behind. Lyra and Ethan stood in silence for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. The world around them felt still, as if everything were waiting for them to take the next step. We need to go, Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. Ethan nodded, though a part of him still felt uncertain. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew that they couldn't turn back now. They had come too far, and there was no going back. Together, they would face whatever challenges awaited them, whatever darkness lay ahead. And as they turned to leave the clearing, Ethan felt a sense of resolve settle within him. This was just the beginning of their journey, and he would stand by her side through it all.